While I was still in high school, a now famous psychoanalyst, Theodore Reich, wrote a classic work on listening. It's called The Third Ear. It was another 15 years until I discovered this remarkable book. Dr. Kyle Arnold recently reviewed this book in an essay, and she described how throughout much of American culture and from our earliest training, listening takes on a meaning more related to heeding a warning or complying with a directive, not just listening to attend and understand. Our training in listening commonly involves learning to conform to the demands of authorities and takes on an element of emotional suppression that's associated with it. We could call the effects of this early training submissive listening. Unfortunately, submissive listening can easily turn to not listening at all. This is in order to heed and not heed, in fact, to miss what sounds like orders of a higher rank that we do not want to hear. I remember watching my father turn off his hearing aids when my mother said something he didn't want to hear. However, be encouraged. We can replace submissive listening with the art of meaning-oriented listening, which will transform our everyday relationships because it is empowering and it's clarifying. So in his book, Dr. Reich described how the alternative skill of meaning-oriented listening is intertwined with our ability to listen to ourselves. He noted how our mind has a natural ability to decipher deeper emotional meanings conveyed by the speaker, even when they're unstated or unclear. He called this natural, deep listening ability the third ear. He also recommended that meaning-oriented listeners attend to their internal responses, which provide the most penetrating understanding of what the speaker means. So consider that a meaning-oriented listener is a person who prepares to listen for feelings, for thoughts, for impressions, and even the passing comments of others, staying alert to all avenues of communicative possibilities. On the other hand, submissive listeners often do not slow down and pay attention to how they feel while listening to others. They tend to respond quickly before letting anything sink in. Conversations become more like a set of tennis volleys, back and forth, where any stray silence becomes unnerving. In addition, there's an internal anxiety about being ready to say something when there is an unfilled moment. Otherwise, they may be faced with a pause. So their style of conversation becomes a direct way to control the conversation and ease their own discomfort. In addition, how we first learn to listen then becomes an automatic responding pattern as an adult. Nevertheless, be encouraged because we can move away from these automatic patterns, which are like being asleep to the world around us. We can move toward a more conscious, meaning-oriented listening choice, even when we're not in the context of a speaker. In my late 30s, while I was writing a doctoral dissertation at a university in Los Angeles, many hours were spent at the University Computer Center. You may not remember, but in the 1960s, computers were not like they are today. In those days, there were rows upon rows of filing cabinet-looking things that you had to deal with, and some were in refrigerated rooms. The programs that they used only ran off of punched cards. These punched cards. There were lots of them. And over the time that I did the dissertation, I certainly punched my portion of cards. The person managing the center was also responsible for helping students use the computers. His name was Bob Skorodinsky, a pleasant, easygoing fellow with a lot of patience. And I knew how to follow instructions and ask questions, but I didn't know what I was doing with these cards and computers, so he needed a lot of patience. But Bob had a strange characteristic. Whenever I asked a question, he would look directly at me, and there was a 5 to 10 second pause before he responded. About that long. At first I thought he was essentially deaf. But after this happened a few times, I noticed that his attention was focused completely on me. It became clear then that he was internally absorbing my remarks and preparing an appropriate response to every question I had. I noticed how his responses were well to the point of my inquiry. Nothing less than profound and always appropriate. It took a while, but Bob's odd style taught me a valuable lesson in listening, even though that was not why I was there. As you can tell, he was someone I remember clearly to this day with a debt of gratitude. During 15 years of prayerful meditation, the primary theme running through the book that Charlie and I have just recently published concerns the way we can develop what is called the mind of Christ. While meditating, we were reminded many times how all living things in creation are continuously and unconsciously filled with God's life-giving energy. Otherwise, we would die. His very presence keeps us alive 24/7. This means that God is completely aware of our state at any time, as well as every circumstance that we face. This also implies that we need not explain anything to God, since all is already known. God stands ready to assist us immediately in every way if we are listening. This makes consciously developing a listening for God's voice, an essential skill for all of us to develop. Because God is always present in our life, awake or asleep, we're exhorted to be listening carefully, staying alert to all possible communication approaches. Being the ultimate in creativity, God speaks with many different voices and in many different ways. In fact, God has been known to speak before being asked. So we are told to prepare for the unexpected and the unusual, which are indications of God's creativity. Since God communicates in every possible way, we must be able to listen in every possible way. Become talented observers, even to seemingly simple, passing comments that people make. One example of this kind of listening happened in my late 20s. It was a question in passing posed by an engineering coworker who said, "Why are people going in and out of your office all of the time?" That particular question changed the course of my life. When I took time to consider what the question implied, I realized I was in the wrong profession. That realization involved a complete reorganization of my life that took some 12 years to complete. And in fact, I do not even remember who made the comment. But the comment was life transforming. So we are told that God listens to our yearnings and responds accordingly. So isn't our listening to God as important? Does your prayer life have a listening side to it? The most common example of prayer that we have is right here on Sundays in church. The expressive or talking approach to prayer allows everyone present to join in with a common focus and is an appropriate method at church. But is this all that prayer is intended to be? While preparing our recent book, it became clear that God individually transforms us as we become consciously available to the energy of that transformation. We must consciously receive the power of our transformation from God. But how can we receive this power when we're in the expressive or talking mode all the time? Where are the pauses? There is little or no listening in the most common prayer model that we know. We tend to follow a primarily expressive format throughout our entire prayer life. Even a well-known thesaurus of the English language defines prayer as simply pleading, especially with the deity. Even the synonyms for prayer tend to be more expressive than receptive. Adoration, appeal, begging, chanting, demanding, devoting, entreaty, imploring, invoking, litany, petitioning, pleading, requesting, soliciting. Oh, they're all expressive, aren't they? Well, it may be helpful to take note that receptivity is something entirely different. That same thesaurus definition for receptivity is simply openness. Note how the synonyms for receptivity are more inclusive. Responsiveness, acceptance, broad-mindedness, impartiality, interest, observing, tolerant, understanding. As our listening improves, our sense of God's presence and the recognition of God's many voices becomes easier. As we become used to sensing God's presence, we become sensitive to the dance that takes place between us. We begin to look for the effect of God's presence in every situation that arises. We listen for the ebb and flow of God's energy within us. We note all the variations in God's presence that occur, the fluctuations, the grace of movement, the intensity, the direction. All of those things become part of our awareness. We're also told that in meditation, we were told in meditation that both thinking with the intellect and intuition with the heart are both required to interpret the energy that comes with God's presence. This is particularly important for us North Americans since throughout our common education and training, the intellect has had the greater advantage. Simply by our consciously emphasizing the intuition called the heart, balance develops in the way we function. Intuition is designed as a barometer of circumstances within and around us, as well as the quality of those experiences. So God often speaks through the intuition or the heart. If we're not listening, then God's voice is muted. So though both are important to interpret God's presence, if we must choose, then we are told to listen to our heart, the intuition or the sixth sense, rather than the other 5 externally oriented senses called the intellect. Intuition acts as a guidance system for us. There's an intelligence associated with our heartfelt feelings that discerns the quality of experience and reports the quality of energy present in and around us. The intuition is also a strong indicator of our comfort with the movement that God makes within our lives. It's also important to remember that intuition and beliefs are different sources of information. Have you noticed how it helps to suspend our beliefs in order to listen to our intuition? Our false beliefs tend to dissolve in the truth of the intuition. By doing this, truth prevails in our lives, and our personal development increases pace. So the next time you become confused or concerned with a personal interaction, do not respond immediately. Be like Bob Skorodzinsky. Take pause try listening to your inner feelings first. You may find that doing so initially is uncomfortable because some awkward memories, unexpected emotions, strange associations may arise when patiently pursued. However, the unwanted inner experiences tend to awaken a deep understanding within and lead to freer and fuller relationships. So how will we know the voice of God when we hear it? Charlie and I were told to focus on the voice and the feeling together. While tuning and scanning during earlier meditations, I recognized the difference in the lucid quality of the voice energy that came to us. It had a distinctive signature that identified it for my internal scanner. There was an identifiable, special, unique feeling associated with every word. This feeling made it possible for us to discriminate between what we were thinking and what was being downloaded. When the feeling was there, writing went smoother and faster. Soon I became aware that I could not write any information unless I sensed and recognized the unique energy of the voice. God also alleviated my concerns for accuracy by saying that if the message were untrue, you would not be able to write it down. That was very encouraging. God's voices seem to wear a name tag, differentiating it from all the others. We're told to look for the energy behind the ideas rather than the ideas themselves. God calibrated our internal tuners to recognize the true voice. This way, any thoughts of my own while listening would not mislead us. So in addition to this powerful energy and confirming feeling, there was a sense of truth and an unusual clarity. We were told to sense the energy of the voice and recognize what we are feeling at the same time. So our eyes would pop open when we knew that it was time to write. Knowing became the key. So becoming this certain about God's voice develops from a knowing coming out of our relationship with the presence of God. Furthermore, we can cultivate a knowing of God's presence and influence, even while we're engaged in typical activities of everyday life. Then formal meditation becomes an alternative. All God requires is our willingness to work in and through us at all times. An attitude of what? Listening, openness to God's energies within our total life. Certainty comes as the knowing develops. In our book, even a formula for developing this knowing was offered. Now, because intuition and beliefs are different sources of information, by removing any distorted beliefs we hold to be true, we tend to trust our heart and intuitive feelings more. This way, our intellect cannot distort the accuracy of our feelings any longer. And feelings tend to serve more than one purpose. They draw us toward what is better and repel us away from what is worse. Very nice. Feelings can serve as a sensitive guidance system. Listening to them will tell us how to live our life. We can also choose to go against our intuition. But let me caution you, it's at your own peril. We now know that God constantly transforms energies in the work in everyone's best interest. This is true love, when you do anything in the best interest of all concerned. So everyone is important to God, including you. That's the part that's often left out. So even though everyone is connected with God's energy on an unconscious level, God needs our conscious attention in order to do the transforming work in our development. So we need to listen well so that our energies become consciously available and connected to God in this way. Fortunately, man has been created with the natural capacity to hear and apprehend these ideas. So I leave you with some heartening recommendations. Continue to understand and pursue the mind of Christ. Intensify your search for truth by listening with the third ear. Remember that God does not waffle for an instant and is always right here. Remember also there is no there. Listen for the creative voices that God uses to communicate with you. Expect the unexpected. Move forward, do not look backward with any regrets. Fear and contraction are things of the past. God's direction is expansion, upward and outward. For our time then, the principles of living are open, expand, connect, and follow, no matter what happens. Amen.